Yes, that's right. It's me, Sergeant Host Eric of the Type Police, back again. I'm going to pull over and discuss the type of an individual who I've heard the name of plenty of times as being a bit of a typological devil-may-care, you might say. Queen's Gambit. Try as you might, you just can't hide, 'cause you're mistyped. And I've been waiting to pull you over all night. Type Police. Type Police, please pull that guy over. He says he's INTJ, but seems extroverted, sensing to me. I think he's ESFP or Type Police. So let's see who we're taking a look at here today. A gentleman by the name of Queen's Gambit. This is marijuana activates introverted perception and blunts introverted judgment. Let's see what he has to say about it. Now he's got this one hashtagged INTJ. This suggests to me that he's probably self-identifying currently as an INTJ. So we're going to type police him accordingly. If he's not an INTJ, we'll have to throw him in the slammer. But if he is, we give him a pass for his former mistyping of himself. All right, let's see what he has to say.
It seems that out of introverted perception, introverted judging, extroverted perception, extroverted judging, it seems that marijuana seems to activate extroverted judging, activate introverted perception, and blunt extroverted perception and introverted judgment in someone who's a lead extroverted perceiver. So this is very interesting because the results will be like the results of someone who is an INTJ. But you can see this very blunted extroverted perception behind everything. So it's likely they probably wouldn't be mistyped visually, but to perhaps someone who is more a layman or doesn't have sort of skill in typing someone visually as far as the signals that these elements are producing, they would probably get it wrong. Now, the interesting thing as well too is another person started a medication and it had an overall blunting effect. Now, my medication is well known to have an overall blunting effect. So what does the overall blunting effect mean? The overall blunting effect means that the medication is not targeted. Medication, like psychotropic drugs, are not targeted specifically at depression or specifically at anxiety. It's wrong to say that these are anti-anxiety medications because it's misleading. It's simply, they blunt everything.
You will note right off the bat a desire to distill things that are rather nuanced and complex into singularities, right? So it is not the case that anti-anxiety drugs blunt down everything cognitively, but it certainly is the case that a general sedative is not a medication that is targeted towards anxiety in the same way, say, that a cream that clears up a rash is going to be targeted towards that thing. Now, the reality is, probably for all medications, that cream actually does a lot more than just get rid of the rash. That's just the only part we care about paying attention to. We would say that right off the bat, we know that he's singularizing things, and he's got an agenda here too. You can feel it, right? His initial claim, his base level claim that marijuana has an impact on perception and thinking is not necessarily outrageous. People smoke marijuana for a reason. It has some sort of intoxicating effect, presumably. And sure, there's cause to think that it may impact, say, for example, how you score on a given test that requires meow, meow, meow. I don't think that's been established very clearly. It certainly hasn't been established anecdotally or from data that's available to us all that it has that impact on me. You can look back to videos of me when I'm 17 years old, and I'm very much the same way. And I'm very much the same way whether I'm smoking marijuana or not. So we have a lot of data in front of us that we could, now obviously I'm not saying he's referencing the same data, but any person has available to them plenty of data that contraindicate this notion that we can make these sort of broad statements about the impacts of marijuana. But he makes them anyway, which suggests that he likes singularizing things. That is consistent with an NI frame of reference. Let's let him continue for a bit longer and see if he gets a little bit more nuanced in his thinking.
What would this do to someone's signals in their presentation? Well, this depends. How long have they been on the medication? In my case, I've been on the medication long enough that it's actually become a part of my personality. I imagine at this point, it's like whatever it was blunting before, I don't think it has the ability to really subdue very much now, because that wouldn't make any sense due to tolerance. And eventually the true aspects of someone's nature reveal themselves regardless of whatever blunting effect you try to put on them, or they try to put on themselves willingly or whether it's unwillingly. Eventually, the true aspects of your nature come out. You can't train certain things out of yourself is what I'm trying to say. So, but it begs the question, could enough use of these substances actually change your personality type?
Okay, I'm interested in type policing him, but I can't help but engage with the wrongness of what he's saying. The wrongness of that speculation even. We can look honestly at the data that we have. We know people who possibly we knew as a kid, and then we know them as they go through a drug period, and we see that they maintain the same personality. You can look at a video of me at 17 years old. I'm clearly the same guy making the same kind of arguments, same attitude, same bearing, same affect, and there's 30 years of drug use between then and now for me, and I'm the same guy. Trying all kinds of different drugs. Being on Adderall, not being on Adderall, being a meth addict for a while, smoking lots of marijuana, being a drunk for a while. So we know that there are plenty of examples like me, that you probably know someone in your life. They may have become a more messed up version of themselves, but it didn't change how they attended, how they paid attention, what personality type they were. The bottom line is this. If I do get really, really high, I'm a really, really high ENTP. I'm in a state of abnormality. I'm maybe less talkative than I might in some other context be. All of that is true, but that does not mean that it's impacted my channels of attention. I'm still paying attention via the same channels. I may just not be as effective at doing so because I'm intoxicated. That's the proper way to think about it. He's thinking about it wrong right off the bat. We can eliminate TI front stack. He's not a TI user. All right, let's listen to a little bit more of his nonsense here on drugs, then we'll go to his homepage and we'll see what I think is pretty good evidence for a total lack of extroverted intuition.
What these substances are developing then is they're developing the reflecting pathways, not the pulse pathways. So they're subduing the pulse pathways and they're activating the reflecting pathways. And essentially that would put someone in essentially an inverse. And really, if you think about it, if they're constantly on that substance all the time, then they are that type.
Now he's talking about drugs at this point that you can get on that you really can't get off of, that you have to stay on them for long stretches of time. And isn't that drug part of their personality then? He's drawing sort of NI conclusions by conflating two different things, namely a drug that impacts something about you psychologically and your cognitive processes. So just because your cognitive processes are part of your overall psychology and your brain chemistry and stuff, it doesn't mean that everything that impacts brain chemistry is related to your cognitive functions. Note, Rachel's personality is returned to her by going on a drug that she has to stay on all the time. It is not altered by that drug. She is Rachel who's healthy when she's on that drug, and she's suffering from a mental illness when she doesn't take that drug. So the whole frame of reference here is wrong. Not all drugs that impact the mind change the personality. A person is their personality, right? A person is an expression of a stack of cognitive functions. So to say that people doing drugs becomes part of their personality, it's simply wrong. You may say that it might affect their affect to some extent. In other words, when I got high, my affect was more introverted. That's my affect, and we need to draw distinctions between things like affect and personality, affect and cognitive functions. You're failing to draw those distinctions. All right, let's go to his main page here. Here's part of the reason why I have never really afforded him much attention or didn't think he really deserved it. You'll notice he does type police videos. His most popular videos are type police videos. And so full disclosure, let's talk a little bit about the historical interaction between Queen's Gambit and Talking with Famous People. Queen's Gambit came into the Talking with Famous People live stream at one point and started saying some stuff that was wrong. I corrected him, and he didn't provide any sort of justification that was adequate. So I pointed that out. Ultimately, I ended up saying those were some very weak arguments, and that really offended him. Then after that, he went on some stretch of time where he seemed determined to do whatever he could to do me damage, to come into the live stream and try to reduce me as a human being, try to attack my character or whatever. Things like that. Of course, one of his big angles of attack is that I'm not an ENTP, that I'm actually a man. This is something that people who hate me want to say. They want to say this because if they could establish doubt about my type, then it would seem to them, and probably to me as well, that it would cascade down that, well, look, if Eric's been so certain for so long about him being an ENTP, if we can just shove some sort of doubt into there, then obviously it would cast doubt on everything he says typologically going forward. But I would note this. When dealing with and encountering people like this guy, what I always pay attention to is, number one, are they interested at all in balancing their approach? If he were interested in establishing the fact that I'm not an ENTP, he would have to give serious time to the matter of my obvious amount of extrovert. And the way to get around that would be to do something called special pleading, where you say, well, normally an ISFJ, for example, wouldn't express so much extroverted intuition. But in this instance, he is expressing so much extroverted intuition, presumably because of some particularist thing, like because he was raised in a family where meow is the most common form of special pleading. The problem here is, even if you were to special plead me to excuse my apparently excess extroverted intuition, you don't just get to exist within the frame of this argument. You still have to say, well, then why are no other ISFJs anything like him? So, okay, let's watch something else here by him and see if we can get down a little bit more to the bottom of what type he is. He is pretty clearly TE. He's not using TI reasoning for things. If he does self-identify as INTJ, well, then that would make sense that he wouldn't be TI. The thing is, how do you handle it if you're the person who chooses to copy somebody else so directly and try to sort of steal somebody else's idea as your own, as a way both to show how much you hate the guy and, I guess, pay unwitting homage to him concurrently. I don't think anybody's going to really think he's the type police guy. Somebody told me this a long time ago, of course, but it didn't really bother me. I just thought, yeah, well, whatever. I said at the time, well, he's certainly not allowed to use the song, and he's not allowed to use any of the other, like, branding. I'm not going to bother even claiming any kind of ownership over the title. If he wants to run a competing type police, you know, my basic approach is to each their own. You know, you do what you're going to do. I'm not going to try to police shit, you know? All right, I'm going to mute me for a bit, and we're going to listen to his analysis and see what kind of analysis it is. He feels maybe ISTJ. We'll see, though. Let's listen. We'll see if he's more SI or NI.
All right, so I managed to find a few real INTPs. They are extremely scarce, especially on YouTube. And to be honest with you, in real life, I've maybe come across one female INTP. They're so rare. I actually think that they're more rare than the female INTJ, and they're lovely. They're very likable. So let's just. Okay, so the picture tells the whole tale. Look at this. Okay, so here's one. All right, now there's another, and look at it. It's almost the same exact expression, even in the soul frame. Same rigid posture. Okay, I do think different levels of consciousness. Okay, let's watch them behaviorally. Let's listen to the cadence. Let's kind of analyze this a little bit. So this is Dr. Rhonda Patrick. I actually agree with almost everything she says, which I think also kind of confirms it even more, even though that's a very biased way to look at things.
That like a single hyperthermic treatment, which was with a
Notice also how warm her gesturing is.
device that raised the core body temperature.
That was a bit of a sway there too. Okay. Notice how there's a constant disengagement as well. That's because she's accessing JI. JI is pulling the strings of everything else.
Okay, so obviously the number one takeaway here is he's talking about cognitive functions, attentional processes, presumably, but he's not talking about anything that links to cognition at all. He's talking about physicalities only. The idea that, you know, you can mostly tell what type somebody is by their body language is very consistent with ISTJ, because what does it do for them? It allows them to somehow no longer need FE. FE is how you read someone's body language, of course. You know, so reading someone's body language is using your own extroverted feeling. He's typing people with saying they have similar FE cues without being aware that that's what he's using. He thinks there's something deeper than that. There are different people who have similar FE cues, and I don't doubt that you can sort of make some sort of headway as to where FE is in the stack by reading body language similarities between different people. But he's trying to type an INTP here by not factoring in introverted thinking, but instead by using his own extroverted sensing that is determined by an introverted sensing frame. He's absolute valuing for the external world extroverted sensing, which is to say the external concrete data, and he's using his own introverted sensing frame of knowing the body's positioning in space. That makes me think ISTJ, but it's not sufficient to type him as that, of course, but let's let him go for a little while longer.
Thank you.
Like almost 3 degrees could have an antidepressant effect. Well,
Okay, so she resolved there. That's introvert perception.
she reached out to me and like the FDA shut that whole machine down. Like, no, you can't use that for research anymore, which kind of shut down the whole sauna depression.
Okay, so here's that. Now let's watch Elena's.
You know, it's that part of it I can't control, that external part I can't. So it's exciting to watch it, but I also know that I have no control over it. So
Was it scary at all getting success? I mean, you were successful in Canada, but
Also, the thing to notice, this is something that's classic with extrovert intuition. They just tend, if it's in the first two, the top two, they just tend to have a naive look to their eyes. She has it too.
They have a naive look to their eyes? What? I mean, you know, like, here's the only reason okay, so I might sometimes talk about beta quadri eyes being a certain shape and appearance and being maybe watery or something like that, I don't know. But what's interesting to say that they have a naive look to their eyes. I'm using my FE right now, and I would not call that look naive at all. Would you? Would you say they have a naive look to their eyes?
no.
So, does she have a naive look? Does that look naive to you? It looks skeptical, if anything.
Yeah, honestly, she kind of looks pissed.
So, I mean, on this one, it's interesting because he's not just wrong in his basic frame of reference, which is to say that it's a good idea to use physical cues to type people, but he's wrong about the exact physical cue he's interpreting. That's not a naive look. So, I mean, that's, at this point, the wrongness is starting to cascade all the way down to the bottom, as per the turtles in Bertrand Russell's famous questioner's response.
Those are the two INTPs. Now let's look at the one who thinks she's an INTP. All right, so one slam dunk way to tell if someone's FI is uncoordinated emphasis, uncoordinated emotion.
Since having a why, the concept that Guy Simon Sinek came up with, really is helpful in that hard moment.
Okay, that was severe. All right, let's watch this on slow motion so you guys can see this. You must ask yourself, do your eyes and ears deceive you?
really is helpful in that hard moment of taking away that instant gratification and instead going with the less exciting, stable decision that will benefit you in the long run.
Notice how she has more of a snappiness, snippiness, sassiness to her, all these things. Okay, it's because she's from a different quadra. She's using completely different functions. Functions that are absent in these other people.
Okay, why did he slow down that clip? What are we supposed to be looking at? Or seeing or hearing? Because then he proceeded to say, you can hear a snappiness or a sassiness in her voice, but you don't hear that when he slows it down. You do. I agree. There's a certain I guess you'd call it that, sassiness or snappiness. But what's his reasoning for thinking she's FI? Let me see if he explains it any better than that. I mean, so far, I'm definitely leaning SI because I'm not really hearing any intuitive thinking or intuitive ideation at all. It's all really kind of concrete, not thought out at all. He's not done any meta-analysis. How am I thinking about this, and how ought I be thinking about this? What would qualify as a good way to think about this? What qualifies as the proper way to validate a given question that's in dispute? He's not done any thinking about that question. Concrete observations without much analysis. That's exactly what we're getting here. And obviously very poor FE because he can't even read those women's facial expressions properly, and they're very straightforwardly not naive, if anything, the contrary. Let's let him see if he gives us any kind of real analysis at some point.
So definitely remembering what you're setting out to do. If you don't know, it's a good thing to...
Which is something you can like buy off Amazon, where it's like a sauna, like your head's out, but like it's like a tent, like a sauna tent.
Yeah, my wife had one of those.
To figure out about yourself. I think this is probably definitely a save your identity thing to do.
But let's put this to the test. Let's see if Rhonda, in slow motion, let's see if she has the same mouth movement. Let's see if she has that on coordinated.
Really, you're a human being. And depression effect.
Mouth movement? I mean, oi. You're asking about an INTP here. There's not one speck of, when he's playing clips with these people, he's not checking to see whether they're using TI logic or not. Even though it's the first and foremost thing that distinguishes an INTP from something else, it's not the way they move their mouths, right? I mean, at best, he's identified a good correlate. It's not a justification. It's not an explanation for something. He can't explain and defend to somebody why somebody's a given type. He can just make statements about facial expressions. I don't think an INTJ would be this weak. I think an INTJ would do better work than this, And I don't mean to insult ISTJs. I'm just saying ideationally, this is very low quality ideation. He is not making any kind of progress on the abstract landscape of cognitive functions here at all. He's not validating it against anything meaningful. He's just not holding himself accountable to be right at all for any reason whatsoever. Let's see what this says.
Art, I gave you a way out of that because basically that was an extroverted feeling way out. I had given, for people to understand, I had given Art a 24 hours to join me in a voice chat, to submit a video. I knew he wasn't going to do that because he didn't feel comfortable submitting a video. That's fine. But he won't even compromise and join in a voice chat. I've never even talked to this guy once. He's done a lot of suspicious things already. He's done some undermining things already. Okay, in his own server. I don't know if I can trust him. And this was the whole point, was that I was having some issues with a bunch of people and it just brought things into question. And maybe I was projecting a bit onto Art, but I said, listen, I need you to compromise. I need you to just join me in voice chat. He refused to do that. I said, I'm giving you 24 hours to basically prove to me who you are. He doesn't want to budge. So I thought about it and I was like, I'll just try to smooth this over and I'll give him a way out. So I sent to everyone. Art and I had a nice voice chat last night. Happy we can come to a compromise. Multiple people liked it, but Artem couldn't accept this as an act of good faith on my part.
Wow. It's interesting that he's still trying to spin it. So basically, he lied and said he voice chatted with this guy and everything was fine and a bunch of people liked it. And then the guy's like, no, we didn't voice chat. I refused to voice chat with you. What are you talking about? And now he's trying to say, and for some reason, fucking Art didn't like that. I am afraid homie's gonna have to go to the slammer.
I think
I think so too.
For shizzo. As an INTJ, you would have both much better NI, better NE, and probably better TI as well. You seem to embrace the countervalued aspect of TI much more than the demonstrative aspect of TI, which sort of makes sense more for an ISTJ because ISTJs are physical first in their affect and TI is a metaphysical function, so they're going to countervalue it more when it runs afoul of your first three functions as it does. In other words, you're the opposite of me. I really don't like TE because I go metaphysical, 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 and TE is physical. You really don't like TI. Why? Because you go physical, 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 and TI is metaphysical. So it's a super countervalued 6. You and I are both those types. Unfortunately, you super countervalue what you need to be right in this domain, and you are definitely heading to the slammer, sir. You are no INTJ. You are no INFJ. You are no INTP or whatever the fuck else you call yourself. You are, in fact, an ISTJ who belongs in type jail. Come right here to the station. I'm going to throw you in the slammer, alright? You're welcome also. You were so desperate for me to pay attention to you for such a long time. I hope it's satisfying, even though it's 6 months later. Yes, I finally paid enough attention to you to throw you in jail. You're welcome. Try as you might, you just can't hide, 'cause you're mistyped. And I've been waiting to pull you over all night. Type police, type police. Please pull that guy over. He says he's INTP, but seems extroverted sensing to me. I think he's ESFP or type police. Okay, now I'm going to end this stream and edit the video a little bit. Thanks for being here. Don't forget to eat plenty of cheese. No jury on this one. He's guilty.